My name is Lindsay Cornute, and this is On Air with Heritage Action, where we break down in 5 minutes or less how you can get involved today in the fight for conservative values. So Congress has finally left D.C. for the rest of 2021. Thank goodness they're out of here. So we're doing something a little bit more fun on the podcast today. We're going to be talking about social media and how that really helps us win on the issues, and how we've seen a lot of fights in 2021. We've been successful because of a lot of things, but also how activists have been able to really double their activism using social media. So we're diving into that today with Thad Brock, our digital communications manager, and he's going to talk to us all about social media. So thanks for joining us, Thad.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lindsay. So if there's one thing that I've seen at Heritage Action is that when activists speak, elected officials listen.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the best ways to be an effective activist is through social media and sharing our content. For most issues, we have what's called a toolkit, and you can check those out on heritageaction.com/issues. But right now we've got a really big one going on the Biden Build Back Broke bill, and which we know is going to do nothing but increase inflation even higher than it is now and bankrupt America in the process.
And we know that, our listeners know that, but
they do.
We've got to communicate that to officials and everyone else.
Exactly. And so in these toolkits, we lay the background for an issue. We provide talking points. We have sample letters to the editor so people can, write into their local newspaper. We've got social media posts that people can look at and copy to post on their own channels. And what's really cool about these social media component to these toolkits is that when you go in there, you click on it, and it'll populate up to your own Twitter, your own Facebook account, and it'll pre-populate who your member of Congress is based on your location, which is really cool.
Makes it so easy.
Yeah, so you send that message out, that tweet out, the post out, and it tags your member of Congress, so they will see it here in Washington.
Yeah, that's the fun stuff about social media. It's a kind of a way to do it quicker and faster and reach more people, which is great. That was a good rundown of kind of what our digital tools are, and I really like that those toolkits, you have social media, which is great, but you also have different forms. So you have letters to the editor, or you can call your member of Congress. You have a lot of different avenues to try something new and really make sure your activism counts. So that's great. I love what we've done this year with that. So let's kind of talk about one of the examples that you saw where sentinels and activists really use social media in an effective way.
Yeah, so I think one of the most recent wins that we've seen on the grassroots front is on the Biden vaccine mandate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we talked about that in our first episode of On Air with Heritage Action, which go back and listen to that if you haven't already. But we talked about how listeners can leave a public comment on that OSHA vaccine emergency temporary standard and kind of voice their opposition there. And go ahead and tell us about it.
Yeah, so, just like you said, we saw a flood of public comments being submitted to the OSHA homepage. Over 25,000 comments came from just Heritage Action Sentinels and activists.
Oh, awesome.
And, look at where we are in our country. Courts all across the nation are striking down the mandate, and they're saying no to the little reindeer games that the Biden administration's trying to play. And they're just sick of it, and they don't want any more mandates, period. But one really cool thing about the public comments was we saw so many people double their activism. So Heritage Action sent out texts, emails, we did calls, and social media posts, and with the link to the OSHA homepage, people submitted their comment, and oftentimes they would post about it on their social media. So their friends, their social networks were seeing, that example as well. And all of this is really important because in our form of government, the people has the voice. We are the ones who hold our right to vote, and we are the ones that have an impact. And the people in Washington, they represent us.
They have to listen to us.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
We're the ones that put them there. And, it brings it full circle because those elected leaders see it, but then, they understand this is the public's view. And every time someone submits a public comment like that, or they take an action or a stance on another issue, that gives that represents that person's voice, and it also lets other people know just who is for or against an issue.
And it excites, it creates a public fervor. And I mean, you've seen what's been going on in the courts. They've been taking action here.
Yeah.
Members of Congress are taking action, and it's all because, one, these public comments, but largely Americans sharing their voice and doubling their impact, posting on social media, telling their friends and family. So,
and when this impact, like with this kind of impact in the grassroots, this is an example of how much sway activists have. And when it's focused, I mean, there's no stopping it.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a perfect example of not only the kind of power of grassroots, but really how activists doubled their impact and use social media to share that as well. So that's just such a great example, Dad. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's great. Today's call to action is kind of related to social media. We want you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Rumble, YouTube, all of them, just so you can stay up to date, stay in the know, really get the first sight at what's going on in Washington. That's one thing, but also kind of join our community and see other like-minded activists and like-minded people who want to take action and join us in the fight for conservative values. So that's what social media is all about, and I'm so glad that we're really able to share our voice and share your voice through social media and to new audiences. So thanks for breaking that down with us today, Thad.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lindsay.
That's it for another episode of On Air with Heritage Action. Thank you for tuning in. Share this episode with your friends, and be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Rumble to stay in the know and up to date with Heritage Action. And one last thing, if you'd like to get updates on the podcast sent straight to your phone, text podcast to 51776. That's podcast to 51776.